Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe this channel. Let's start the first part of the episode. The silence before the storm. The courtroom didn't just fall silent. It collapsed into silence. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your chest, heavy and suffocating, as if even breathing too loudly might shatter something fragile hanging in the air. Every eye in the room was fixed forward, every movement stilled, every whisper swallowed before it could exist. On one side stood Meri. Her hands were clasped so tightly together that her knuckles had turned pale, almost translucent under the harsh courtroom lights. Her lips trembled, not from weakness, but from restraint. From years of swallowed words. From decades of pain carefully folded and tucked away. But her eyes told a different story. They burned. Not with sadness. Not even with fear. But with something far more dangerous. 20 years of betrayal finally demanding to be seen. Across the aisle sat Kody. Relaxed. Reclined. Unbothered. His arms were folded across his chest, his posture almost casual, like he was attending a minor inconvenience rather than a life-altering trial. A faint smirk lingered on his lips, the kind worn by someone who believed he had already won. To him, this wasn't a reckoning. It was just another argument. Another family dispute. Another moment he could outmaneuver, outtalk, outlast. What he didn't understand, what he had never understood, was that Meri hadn't come here for closure. She hadn't come to talk. She hadn't come to heal. She came to end something. On the judge's bench rested a single binder. It looked ordinary at first glance, sealed, thick, unassuming. But inside it was devastation. Screenshots of messages long deleted. Financial records that didn't align. Forged signatures. And one single document, that had the power to dismantle everything Kody had spent years building. A document he had sworn under oath never existed. Behind Meri, seated in the gallery, were familiar faces. Christine sat upright, her expression tense but unwavering, her eyes never leaving Meri. Beside her, Janelle leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped, her focus sharp and calculating. They weren't just spectators. They were witnesses. To the truth. To the unraveling. To the moment everything would finally be dragged into the light. Cameras lined the back of the courtroom. Media personnel whispered quietly, their anticipation barely contained. This wasn't just a legal proceeding anymore. This was a spectacle. A story the world was waiting to consume. But for Meri, it was something far more personal. At exactly 9 a.m., the courtroom doors creaked open. Every head turned. Meri stepped inside. But she wasn't the woman people remembered. She wasn't quiet. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't the first wife who stood in the background, holding everything together while slowly falling apart. No, this version of Meri walked with purpose. Each step deliberate. Each movement controlled. She wore black, not as a symbol of grief, but as a declaration. Not mourning what was lost, but burying it. Kody didn't even look up at first. He sat at the defense table, sipping from a stainless steel cup, leaning toward his attorney with a quiet chuckle, as if sharing a private joke. That same smug confidence. That same belief that he was always 10 steps ahead. He wasn't. And he was about to learn that the hard way. Meri reached her seat. Without hesitation, she dropped a thick manila envelope onto her lawyer's desk. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Inside that envelope was everything. Years of emotional manipulation. Financial deception. Broken promises carefully disguised as misunderstandings. And buried deep within it, a signature from 2012. A legally binding agreement. One that clearly stated Meri's entitlement to 25% of the family trust. A trust that, conveniently, had recently been drained. Without her knowledge. Without her consent. Without her name. Kody had spent years rewriting reality. But paper didn't forget. The courtroom shifted as the judge entered. Judge Harmon. A woman whose presence alone commanded order. Her hair was pulled tightly into a bun, her glasses perched low as her sharp eyes scanned the room. She didn't need to raise her voice. One strike of the gavel was enough. This court is now in session. Her voice cut cleanly through the tension. Case number 129A. Meri Brown versus Kody Brown. A pause. Then, clearly, civil suit based on fraud, defamation, emotional damages, and violation of marital asset agreement. For the first time that morning, Kody looked at Meri. Really looked at her. His expression unreadable. But Meri didn't flinch. Not even for a second. Her attorney stood. Laurel Finch. Young but sharp. Calm but dangerous. Your Honor, she began, her voice steady, we are here today because my client has been systematically erased from her own life. The courtroom leaned in. What began as a spiritual union, Laurel continued, became a calculated pattern of isolation, control, and financial manipulation. Kody's lawyer quickly rose. This is a personal matter, he argued. Not a legal one. There was no lawful marriage, therefore no legal obligation. Laurel didn't even hesitate. We'll let the evidence speak. She turned. Exhibit A. The document was placed into the judge's hands. And, just like that, the room changed. A ripple of whispers spread. Even from the gallery. Even from those who thought they had seen everything. Because suddenly, there it was. Proof. Not emotion. Not accusation. But something far more powerful. Fact. Meri was called to the stand. As she raised her hand to be sworn in, there was a slight tremor in her voice. I do. But her eyes remained steady. Focused. Unshaken. Laurel stepped closer. Can you tell the court why you're here today? Meri paused. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because she had spent years not saying it. I was married to a man for 32 years. Her voice softened. Who said I was his foundation? A breath. But for more than a decade, her tone shifted. He erased me. The words landed heavily. No one moved. No one spoke. He removed my name from documents, from accounts, from decisions, and then told the world I was never truly his wife. A pause. Then, quieter, but he forgot something. She looked directly at Kody. He signed a promise. And just like that, the trial truly began. When the truth finds its voice, the courtroom didn't breathe. It waited. Meri stood at the witness stand, her fingers lightly gripping the edge as if grounding herself in something solid, something real, after years of living in a reality that had been carefully distorted around her. Across the room, Kody shifted in his seat. For the first time that morning, the confidence in his posture had begun to fracture. It was subtle, barely noticeable to anyone who didn't know him, but it was there. His jaw tightened. His foot tapped once, then again. Because this wasn't going the way he expected. Not anymore. Laurel Finch stepped forward again, her voice calm but carrying a quiet authority that filled the room. Mrs. Brown, she said gently, can you tell the court about the 2012 agreement? Meri inhaled slowly, her chest rising as if she were pulling strength from somewhere deep within. It was a promise, she said. Not just words. A promise. We agreed that no matter what happened, no matter how the relationships changed, we would each keep our share of what we built together. Her eyes flickered briefly, not with doubt, but with memory. He told me himself, she continued. He said if we ever separated, I would have my portion, my security, my future. A pause. And I believed him. There it was. Not just betrayal, but trust, broken in its purest form. Laurel nodded slightly. And what happened to that agreement? Meri didn't hesitate this time. He denied it existed. A murmur rippled faintly through the courtroom. He told everyone, his family, the others, that it was never real. That I was imagining things. That I was confused. Her lips pressed together for a brief moment. But I wasn't confused. She lifted her chin slightly. I was erased. Kody suddenly leaned forward. That's not true, he muttered under his breath, but it was loud enough. The judge's gavel struck sharply. Mr. Brown, you will remain silent until it is your turn. The authority in her voice was absolute. Kody leaned back again, but the tension in his shoulders had returned, stronger now, more visible. Laurel continued. Did Mr. Brown ever pressure you into financial decisions against your will? Meri's answer came without hesitation. Yes. The word echoed. He told me if I didn't sign over my rights to the family business, I would be cut off. A pause. From everything. Laurel tilted her head slightly. Can you clarify? Meri swallowed, but her voice stayed steady. He said I would be excluded. From the show. From the income. From the life we built. A sharp intake of breath could be heard somewhere in the gallery. Meri reached into the evidence stack and pulled out a printed page. I have the message. She handed it forward. The judge examined it briefly. Exhibit B is admitted. The shift in the room was undeniable now. This wasn't emotional storytelling. This was evidence. Meri continued, her voice quieter now, but somehow stronger. For years, I thought staying silent made me loyal. Her eyes dropped briefly, then lifted again. He told me that leaving would make me a failure. That speaking out would make me disloyal. A pause. But the truth is, she exhaled slowly. He was the one who broke everything first. Laurel stepped back. No further questions, Your Honor. Kody's attorney stood quickly, adjusting his jacket as if trying to regain control of something that was already slipping. We request a brief recess before cross-examination. The judge studied him for a moment. 15 minutes, she said. But we proceed today. The gavel struck. And just like that, the room erupted into motion. Meri stepped down from the stand. But she didn't look back. Not at Kody. Not at the courtroom. Not at the cameras. She didn't need to. Because for the first time in years, she had finally been heard. As she passed the gallery, a hand reached out gently. Christine. Just a brief touch on her shoulder. A silent gesture. Support. Solidarity. Understanding. Meri paused for the smallest fraction of a second, then nodded. She wasn't alone anymore. Across the room, Kody leaned in toward his attorney, his voice low, but urgent now. This is getting out of control. His attorney didn't respond immediately, because there was no easy answer anymore. The courtroom reconvened. But the energy had changed. What had started as tension had now become something sharper. Something inevitable. Laurel stood once more. Your Honor, she said clearly, the plaintiff calls Christine Brown to the stand. The name alone sent a ripple through the room. Kody's head snapped up. For the first time, he looked unprepared. Christine rose slowly. Composed. Measured. But beneath that calm exterior was something far more powerful. Years of silence. Years of watching. Years of knowing. She took the stand and was sworn in. I do. Her voice was soft. But it carried. Laurel approached carefully. Mrs. Brown, she began, can you describe your experience within the family dynamic? Christine didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Meri, then at the judge, and finally at Kody. For years, she said slowly, we lived in something that looked like a family. A pause. But it wasn't. The words landed like a quiet explosion. Everyone had a role, she continued. And Meri, her voice softened slightly. Meri was the foundation. She swallowed. But he treated her like she was disposable. Kody shifted again, visibly uncomfortable now. His attorney scribbled rapidly. Laurel stepped closer. Did you witness any emotional mistreatment toward Meri? Christine's answer was immediate. Yes. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Yes, again and again. The courtroom leaned in. He would ignore her for days, Christine said. He would dismiss her, mock her, make her feel invisible. A breath. One time, at dinner, her voice tightened slightly. She asked him to pass the salt. A pause. And he said, Christine's eyes hardened. Why? So you can season your loneliness? A stunned silence followed. Even the air felt heavier. Everyone laughed, Christine added quietly. But she didn't. Her gaze flicked briefly toward Meri. She cried. Kody's jaw clenched. His composure was cracking now, visibly. Laurel nodded slowly. Did this behavior continue over time? Christine straightened slightly. It wasn't just moments. Her voice sharpened. It was a pattern. And just like that, the narrative had shifted again. From accusation to confirmation. Laurel stepped back slightly. No further questions. Kody's attorney approached cautiously now. The confidence he carried earlier had been replaced with something far more careful. Measured. Defensive. Mrs. Brown, he began, would you say your perspective is influenced by your personal separation from my client? Christine didn't flinch. Maybe, she said calmly. Then added, but I didn't come here with opinions. A beat. I came with truth. The courtroom fell silent again. Not with tension this time, but with realization. Something was breaking, and everyone in that room could feel it. When the numbers start talking by the time the court reconvened, the atmosphere had transformed completely. The earlier tension, the whispered curiosity, the quiet anticipation was gone. What replaced it was heavier, sharper, more final. No one in that courtroom was waiting for drama anymore. They were waiting for confirmation. Kody sat stiffly at the defense table. Gone was the relaxed posture. Gone was the smirk. Now his arms were still crossed, but not in confidence. In defense. His foot tapped rapidly against the floor, a silent rhythm of anxiety he could no longer conceal. Beside him, his attorney flipped through documents with increasing urgency, scanning, calculating, searching for cracks that were quickly disappearing. Because what had started as a story was turning into a case. Meri sat quietly, her hands resting in her lap. She wasn't trembling anymore. She wasn't unsure. She looked steady, like someone who had already survived the worst part and was now simply watching the truth catch up. Laurel Finch rose once more. Her expression hadn't changed, but her tone carried a new weight. Your Honor, she said clearly, the plaintiff calls Janelle Brown to the stand. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Not loud, but significant. Because unlike Meri's pain and Christine's testimony, Janelle brought something else entirely. Proof. Janelle stood. Her movements were deliberate, controlled, almost methodical. Where Meri carried emotion and Christine carried fire, Janelle carried precision. She took the stand, was sworn in, and sat upright. Her posture was straight, her gaze unwavering. I do. Laurel approached. Mrs. Brown, could you describe your role within the family structure? Janelle nodded once. I handled the finances. Simple, direct, unshakable. That alone shifted the room. For years, she continued, I tracked income, expenses, property investments, business distributions, everything. She placed a thick binder on the stand. The sound alone echoed. Heavy. Final. This contains tax records, property documents, LLC filings, and transaction histories. Across the room, Kody blinked. Once. Twice. Because now, this wasn't about interpretation. It was about documentation. Laurel stepped closer. Can you explain what these records show? Janelle opened the binder, flipping to the first marked section. In 2016, she began, Kody established an LLC called Brown Family Holdings. She paused briefly, ensuring the room was following. It was presented to all of us as a way to unify assets. Land, income from the show, shared investments. A beat. We all trusted it. She turned a page. But in 2019, her voice tightened slightly. He removed us. A murmur spread instantly. The judge lifted her hand. Order. Silence returned, but it was different now. Charged. Laurel leaned in. Removed. How? Janelle didn't hesitate. Our names were taken off the LLC. Her gaze flicked briefly toward Meri. Mine. And hers. Then back to the judge. Without notification. Kody shifted again, this time more visibly. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering sharply. But there was no stopping this now. I only discovered it in 2021, Janelle continued, when I attempted to access financial records for tax filing. She tapped the binder lightly. I no longer had authorization. The weight of that statement settled deeply into the room. Laurel spoke carefully. And what does this mean in terms of assets? Janelle turned another page. It means the shared properties, the land we purchased together, were no longer under shared ownership. A pause. They were under his control. The courtroom stilled again. And was Meri informed of this change? Laurel asked. Janelle's answer came instantly. No. A beat. Neither was I. Kody suddenly stood. I told you, the gavel slammed down. "Sit down, Mr. Brown," the judge snapped sharply, "or you will be held in contempt." He sat, but whatever composure he had left was slipping fast. Janelle continued, her voice steady, but colder now. "There was a property in Arizona," she said. "Land we all invested in." She flipped to another section. "It was sold last year." Laurel tilted her head. "And the proceeds?" Janelle's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the paper. "They were not distributed to all parties." A pause, long enough to matter. "They were redirected." The word landed like a hammer. "Redirected where?" Laurel asked quietly. Janelle lifted her eyes. "Straight ahead. To an account associated with Robin's Property Trust." The reaction this time couldn't be contained. Gasps, whispers, shock that broke through even the courtroom's rigid control. Meri didn't move, but tears had begun to fall, silent, steady, unstoppable. Kody leaned forward again, his voice low but sharp. "That's a distortion, Mr. Brown," the judge warned. Silence snapped back into place. Janelle turned one final page. "And there's more." The words alone sent a chill through the room. "This document," she said, lifting a single sheet, "is a 2020 internal memo." She handed it forward. "It authorizes a 25% payout from Meri's share." Laurel stepped in. "And where was that payout sent?" Janelle didn't blink. "To the same trust." A pause. "Used to fund the renovation of a private residence." The courtroom didn't react this time. It couldn't, because the weight of it all had already settled. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't miscommunication. This was a system. Built. Controlled. And now exposed. Kody's attorney stood slowly. But even he seemed unsure now. "Mrs. Brown," he began carefully, "is it possible your interpretation of these financial records is influenced by personal feelings?" Janelle's expression didn't change. "My feelings are irrelevant." She tapped the binder again. "The records are not." A pause. "Then if this doesn't count," she added, her voice sharpening for the first time, "then none of it ever did." Silence. Complete. Unavoidable. Because in that moment, it wasn't just Meri's story anymore. It wasn't just Christine's testimony. It was numbers. Documents. Paper trails. Things that didn't forget. Things that didn't lie. And things that, for the first time, Kody couldn't talk his way out of. The letter that ended everything. By the next morning, the courtroom no longer felt like a place of law. It felt like a place of reckoning. No chatter. No side glances. No quiet speculation. Just silence. Heavy. Anticipating. Final. Kody sat motionless at the defense table. Not calm, just still. The kind of stillness that comes when a man realizes the ground beneath him isn't solid anymore. His attorney whispered something beside him, but Kody didn't respond. Because for the first time, he didn't have control of the narrative. Meri entered the courtroom slowly. But something was different. There was no binder in her hands this time. No documents. No stacks of evidence. Just a single piece of paper. Worn. Folded. Yellowed slightly at the edges. Held tightly between her fingers like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Laurel stood as Meri approached the stand. "Your Honor," she said, "the plaintiff would like to introduce one final piece of evidence." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Laurel held up the paper. "Exhibit I." A pause. A handwritten letter. Dated March 12, 2020. She turned slightly. Written by the defendant, to the plaintiff. Kody's head snapped up. "What letter?" For the first time, there was no confidence in his voice. Only confusion. And something else. Fear. Meri carefully placed the letter into the evidence tray. Her hands trembled not with weakness, but with the weight of what it carried. "I found it," she said quietly in his nightstand. "After I left." She looked toward the judge. He never sent it. A beat. He never meant for anyone to see it. The courtroom held its breath. The judge adjusted her glasses. "You may read it." Meri unfolded the paper slowly. The faint sound of it echoed louder than it should have. Her eyes scanned the page once. Then again. As if preparing herself. Not for the words, but for what they would confirm. And then she began. "Meri, Her voice wavered, but didn't break. "I don't know what we are anymore." The room disappeared. There was no courtroom. No cameras. No judge. Just truth. "I see you walking around the house like a ghost, and I feel guilty." A pause. But not enough to change. A sharp inhale rippled somewhere in the gallery. "I love you out of duty now, not out of choice." Kody's face drained of color. "I think you deserve honesty, but I don't know how to give it to you." Meri's voice tightened. "Because if I do, everything falls apart." Silence. Absolute. "You were the foundation of this family." Her voice cracked slightly now. "But now, you remind me of everything I failed to build." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them. "I don't know how to love you without lying." The final line hung in the air like something sacred and broken. Meri lowered the letter slowly, folded it carefully, as if even now it still deserved to be handled with care. "That," she said quietly, "is who I was to him." No one spoke. Not the judge. Not the lawyers. Not even the cameras dared to move. Laurel stepped forward gently. "Mr. Brown," she said, "did you write this letter?" Kody swallowed. His lips parted slightly. I don't remember." The words sounded hollow the moment they left his mouth. "But that's your handwriting," Laurel pressed. A pause. "I might have. Christine leaned slightly toward Janelle in the gallery, her voice barely a whisper. "That's how he used to write his anniversary cards." Janelle didn't respond. She didn't need to. Meri lifted her head again. Her voice steadier now. Stronger. "This letter wasn't written for me." She looked directly at Kody. "It was written for you." A beat. "You just never had the courage to say it out loud." The words hit harder than anything before them. Laurel nodded slightly. "Did you ever respond to her?" she asked Kody. Silence. "Did you ever read what she wrote to you?" Kody looked down. Avoiding. Retreating. "I never saw it." Meri exhaled slowly. And for the first time, her pain turned into something else. Clarity. "That's the point," she said. Her voice didn't shake anymore. "You never saw me." The words didn't echo. They settled. "I spent years disappearing," she continued, "hoping one day you'd notice." A tear fell. Then another. "I didn't need you to fix anything." Her voice rose slightly, not loud, but powerful. "I just needed you to be honest." Kody finally looked up. His voice strained now. "I didn't know how." Meri cut him off. Not loudly, but completely. "I didn't need you to know how." A pause. "I needed you to try." Silence fell again. But this time, it wasn't tense. It wasn't uncertain. It was over. The judge cleared her throat softly. Her voice, when it came, was measured, but different now. "This court will take all submitted evidence under review." She glanced briefly at the documents. The binders. The letter. Then at Meri. "Testimony has established a pattern that raises serious legal concerns regarding financial conduct and misrepresentation." Kody didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't react. Because there was nothing left to defend. The gavel lifted. Paused. And fell. "This court is adjourned until final ruling." The sound echoed. But not as an ending. As a beginning. Meri stood slowly. Not victorious. Not triumphant. But free. Behind her, Christine and Janelle rose too. Not as witnesses anymore, but as women who had finally been heard. Kody remained seated. Still. Silent. Because for the first time in years, the story wasn't his anymore. And the truth? The truth had finally spoken. First part of the episode is ended. Thanks for watching this video. Let us know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Next part coming very soon.